Hi, lovely viewers, and welcome back to the channel. I see that you have seen the video's caption and you are giving me the side eye right now. That really, are you really going to give us a monthly prediction on the 10th of September? So I would start by saying I apologize. There has been some issues which has kind of, made me lag consistency, and I definitely solemnly pledge that I am going to work on it, and I am surely going to assure you that from this month onwards you will see the monthly predictions come out much earlier than the start of the month, and that is something that I'm definitely working towards. But even though this is coming a little later than expected, I would still definitely urge you to watch this video, because the major amount of transits and the major amount of change of energies in this month is taking on from the 10th of September itself, when Mercury goes retrograde. And it is causing a lot of changes in the sort of connotations that we have been seeing prior to this 10th of September. So I would definitely say watch this video. It might strike some sort of relevance with you. And this is also because of the fact that this Mercury retrograde has come into the sign of Virgo. So this sign of Virgo is something that the planet of Mercury rules. So its significations kind of even bolster further. And because of being retrograde, all the significations that it would have had in a positive sense kind of turn backwards. It turns the opposite. So rather than actually expecting to be, communicatively eloquent or being perfection oriented or having an analytical and practical thinking process, all of this kind of turns on its head. So it gives you that sort of change in the approach that you will be taking in different sectors of your life. And I will be discussing that for each and every sign in the video now. So I would definitely say keep watching further, and you will get to know much more about your monthly predictions. And let me know in the comment section if any of the predictions resonate with you. And I hope you have a great month of September. Let's get on with it and not waste any further time. To Aries natives, how the month of September is going to turn out. Let's look into what transits are taking place this month. Mainly, the transits that are happening are of the faster moving planets, which is Mercury, Sun, and Venus. These are the major transits that are taking place of these three planets, and all these planets are mainly transferring from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. That is the main thing that is happening in this month. But we are going to look at how all the other planets are basically corroborating with this transit, and what is the possible outcome that we can expect to come about in your case for your month of September. So at the precipice of the previous month, on the 31st of August, Venus transited into the sign of Leo, right? And this is your fifth house. Sun was already there transiting, right? In the sign of Leo. And also with it, Mercury was also transiting from the previous month. So Sun and Mercury were already transiting from your fifth house from the previous month itself. And Venus joins this accumulated energy in your fifth house in the sign of Leo. So what this shows us is that you are right now feeling invigorated regarding things like romance, creativity. You feel like on the top of the world when it comes to especially your creative pursuits and your romantic interests. So you can feel extremely romantically inclined and feel just genuinely happy and have a lot of fun. You can also feel quite confident within yourself about your personality, about your appearance, and that also corroborates because Rahu is right now transiting through your first house. So this shows that all the energy that you've been putting into making yourself better, and be it either by focusing on your personality or by working towards your physical appearance as well. So all of this is actually manifesting into you feeling much better about yourself, which is not something that Aries lack in any sense. They are quite self-confident and self-assured. So this transit is making you feel even more self-assured. So maybe it could be that you're bordering on the cocky scale, but it's not necessary. Also, with the concentration of all this energy in the fifth house, another possibility can be that you are right now looking into investing and how these investments can give you higher profits, and that too with quicker results. So something like a riskier sort of investment, let's say like a cryptocurrency or something of that sort. But you have to be extremely careful of not going overboard and overdoing it or being impulsive with those decisions, especially because Mars is right now transiting through the sign of Taurus. And this is quite a substantial transit because this transit is going to take place until almost 8 months, well into 2023. How this transit basically is going to manifest for you, what are the significations that you can expect to come about financially, especially for you when Mars is transiting through the sign of Taurus. There's a recent video that I've uploaded, and you can watch that for your sign and understand how the result for you can be regarding this transit. But my advice to you would be, even though your interests are right now aligned towards making a quick buck, yet be very sure of how you want to invest your money, because there can also be chances of losing it just as quickly. So be careful regarding that. It's much better to right now, especially in relation to how the planetary transits are going. If you want to align your energies with that transit, it's much better to look into how you want to invest into safer instruments of investment. Well into November, this Mars is going to turn retrograde again. And when this Mars turns retrograde, it's going to start to impact all your decisions that you've made financially. So, if you are making some sketchy decisions right now regarding your finances, it can really come to bite you in the ass later. So just be careful regarding that. And all the significations of this transit have been explained in the recent video. So please go check that out. All the other major transits except this transit of these three planets has been explained before, be it Rahu or the Ketu axis, or be it the Saturn retrograde and Jupiter retrograde. All of these videos have been made, which you can definitely check on my channel. I will also be linking them in the description box, as well as in the end I can attach a playlist where all of these have been kept, and you can go through that again just to brush your memory of how this transit is going to turn out for you. But moving ahead, the major transit that is taking place, the infamous Mercury retrograde in the sign of Virgo on the 10th of September. So how this is going to impact your sign, basically. See, Mercury is in its most exalted state in the sign of Virgo. It works the best because it's its own sign, right? And but because of its significations becoming retrograde, which means like Mercury would have been direct in the sign of Virgo to all go the opposite way. So if Mercury was in Virgo, without the retrograde motion, it would have been like, okay, you're extremely articulate at this moment and you're able to be analytical and extremely coordinated with whatever decisions you're making, especially when it comes to your communication style and stuff like that. But because it is retrograde, it clearly shows that all the significations of Mercury, all the good things that Mercury in Virgo would show, would all turn southwards. So you will have to evaluate stuff like, especially because it's in the 6th house, which is one of the significations of your work, right? So this clearly shows that you need to be extremely careful of how you're speaking to your colleagues at work, because there's a really high likely chance that, you might say something which gets misconstrued and then it comes to, bite you in the ass. Be extremely careful of how you are communicating your ideas, who you are talking to, in the sense of even if you're saying something scandalous or objectionable, you need to be sure of who you are communicating it to. So be very wary of that. Another thing is, I think you right now could feel like, the organization or just a level of routine that you would expect to come about in your life would sort of go haywire. So, that could be something which might be bothersome. And this can especially be in terms of your work. So you might be accustomed to some sort of work schedule or work routine, which might go haywire right now because of varied reasons, right? Especially also because Saturn right now is retrograde in your 10th house, which is another career house that, talks about how your career and public perception is. So this shows a very, very discernible understanding of the fact that you need to be especially vigilant when it comes to how you are being perceived at work and how your actions and communications are basically leading up to your perception. So you need to be extremely careful of how you're projecting your image at work and how you are basically communicating with your colleagues, be it your superiors even, or your subordinates as well. So that is one of the major things. Another thing you need to be careful about is because the sixth house is like the house of it can be also related to health and minor inconveniences regarding health. And because Jupiter right now is transiting through your 12th house and it is in the retrograde motion, and the 12th house is the house of losses, so, and also like hospitalizations and stuff like that. So you need to be careful right now regarding how your approach to health. The tendency right now to be extremely controlling of how you're perceiving health to be like, or how you want to improve your health. You need to be extremely careful of not overdoing something and just being able to give yourself the grace to just sometimes lay back and just exist. So I think that is something that you need to be careful about, because if you kind of are extremely particular about your health, and if you are sort of trying to control it a lot, it might actually backfire. This Mercury retrograde is aspecting your Jupiter retrograde, and your Jupiter retrograde in turn is aspecting your Mercury retrograde. So both the planets are basically doing this back and forth sort of a aspect, and both of these being retrograde means that this impact is going to be extremely significant. So because it's happening on your 6th and 12th house axis, just be careful regarding your health and how you are how your outlook is regarding that. And also be a little careful of how you're dealing with your investments, rather than being more into riskier investments. You kind of take a step back and look into how you can sort of channelize that into safer instruments. Next transit that is taking place is on 17th of September. Sun from the sign of Leo moves into the sign of Virgo, right? So it is joining the Mercury retrograde that is already present there. So now what happens is, already in the mix of how you are right now kind of being indecisive regarding maybe things regarding work, you can feel like the forward momentum that you were having regarding work is kind of being disrupted right now. So you might have to go back and sort of maybe redo your work, or even it can come down to the fact that you're reevaluating your professional decisions. It's a very huge probability and possibility as well. So when Sun conjoins this energy, it sort of starts to impact how you're even looking at yourself right now. So you can kind of become quite self-critical about yourself. And this can even impact your own like philosophies and beliefs regarding certain things, be it your profession, be it your general worldview, because this, as I said before, Jupiter retrograde is going to aspect this house. So when Sun comes here, it's going to also impact that. So, you can even feel conflicted regarding your moralistic views regarding certain things. So that can also be a possibility. So you need to be careful, of how those things are shaping up. Don't try to control everything. Nothing is going to be in your control. So this is quite a crazy time right now. So just go with the tide and, give yourself the grace to just lay back and just kind of reroute and understand, reevaluate your decisions right now. And don't be as self-critical. Mainly I see a lot of focus, especially for this month, for you regarding work and how you are going to deal with conflicts. Especially like there could be chances that your colleagues kind of go behind your back and try to like plot against you, or do something conniving in certain ways to get to you or something like that. It might not be as serious, but there's a possibility and chance of that happening. So it's going to be something that you need to contemplate and grapple with as to how you are going to manage that scenario, and how to not facilitate that rather than minimize that issue. So that is the main energy when sun comes into the 6th house. Also, again, the same thing about the health thing. You need to be careful. Don't get too critical and controlling regarding your health right now. Now, the next thing that happens is on the 24th of September, Venus transits from Leo into the sign of Virgo. Now, Venus is a sign which is considered to be debilitated in the sign of Virgo. So, Venus basically is a sign which is all about love and romance and stuff like that. And when it comes into Virgo, so it's considered to be debilitated because Virgo is not like a romantic sign. It doesn't romanticize anything. It's quite analytical. It's quite perceptive. It's quite practical. So it becomes debilitated in this sign. So what will happen? And especially now, all these 3 signs are in Virgo. Now, what you need to understand is which is the most powerful planet in Virgo right now. Surely it's going to be Mercury, right? Because Mercury is the sign that is the planet, that rules the sign of Virgo, right? So it's one of the most powerful, and it's being retrograde right now. So you know that the main significations of Mercury is going to impact all the conjunction energy that is happening in the 6th house. Now, when Venus comes here, as we had discussed before in the beginning, that, all that romance and sparks, the intensity of romance and everything starts to slowly boil down. So you might become quite critical and realistic about the connections that you have made before until this transit started. So it could lead to some, disagreements, some fights with your romantic partner. It could also mean simply that, with all the other things that are happening in your life right now, like romance starts to take a backseat and you kind of like, let it go. As passionate or as inclined you could be to it, you sort of start to disassociate from it right now because you need to kind of focus on other things that are happening especially in your work life. So that could be the case. Also, Venus can also show how likable you are, and when it turns debilitated in the house of your work colleagues and stuff like that, it goes to again reiterate and show that your public perception and how you are right now communicating, what messages it is sending across to the people who work with you, can be quite key, I would say. I kind of feel like I'm going on and on like a broken record about this, but you need to be extremely careful of how you are communicating, how you are working with your colleagues, because this can serve as a major roadblock to your career aspirations right now. So be careful regarding that. And other than that, just don't try to control and be as critical about things like, be it your work or be it even your health. Try to loosen up a bit and just like live life somehow. So I hope you have a great month, and I hope you don't run into any roadblocks, and I hope you stay safe. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comment section below if any of the predictions that I've shared for you resonate with your experience. Thanks for watching. So, Taurus natives, for you, how the month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits taking place in the month of September. So, the main transits happening in this month are of the faster moving planets of Mercury, Sun, and Venus, which are transiting from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. We are going to see and figure out how this change in the sign of these 3 planets is going to impact you, as well as all the other planets that are right now transiting through their own different signs. We're going to read their significations in tandem and corroboration to understand how the month of September is going to turn out for you. So starting with the very first transit, which happened at the precipice of the previous month, which is on the 31st of August, Venus transited into the sign of Leo. Now, Sun and Mercury were already present here in the sign of Leo before that. So what happens is, with the conjoint energy of Mercury, Sun, and Venus in Leo, which is happening in your 4th house of home and family, this tells us that right now your focus is towards your family members, is towards, things regarding your home. There is a very likely possibility that there might be some renovations that are happening in your house, or there is some sort of addition that is taking place in your house in regards to beautifying it, in regards to increasing its appeal. So that sort of stuff might be very possible. Also, you might be right now geared towards bonding with your family and creating better connections. This can also show that your relationship and communication with your mother especially gets better, and this is a very likely possibility of all the energy that is being concentrated in the fourth house, with Mercury, Sun, and Venus all being present there. Now, the next transit that is happening on the 10th of September is the Mercury Retrograde transit in Virgo. This Mercury Retrograde is taking place in the sign of Virgo, which is its own ruled sign, and this is its exaltation sign in a way, because it's the best. Mercury performs the best in the sign of Virgo. So, in a general sense, if it was not retrograde and it was direct, what this would mean typically would be something along the lines of, you would be extremely analytical. You would also be critical regarding, certain things, be it, and this is like positively critical, and quite perfectionism is something that you would concentrate on. Very detail oriented. So all these things, your communication would become extremely eloquent. So these are the kind of significations that would have happened if Mercury was not retrograde. But what happens when Mercury turns retrograde is all these significations kind of turn backwards. So it's all like the opposite of what I just explained. So you can very clearly see disruptions in the way your communication is happening, how the communication that you're doing is getting misconstrued, your words are being taken out of context, and you are sort of, rather than being analytical and critically thinking about certain things, you can actually maybe in impulsiveness just speak something which kind of you can't take back in a way. So that sort of blunder can also come about. And then because this is happening in your fifth house, there is a possibility that you might make some financial mishap right now in terms of investments into riskier instruments, because also this energy plays in tandem with transit that is taking place of Mars in the sign of Taurus in your first house. And I have in detail explained about what the significations of this transit is going to, come about for your sign. And because this transit is quite substantially impactful for you, especially because it's in your first house. Also because this transit is going to take place for 8 months almost. We're very well into 2023. So I would definitely urge you to watch that video, and I would be linking that in the description box, also linked in the end with a playlist. So as I was saying, you can typically make some errors regarding the investments that you're doing. So be very, very careful of how you're investing right now, and also be aware of the fact that even though it might seem lucrative right now because of the returns that the riskier investments give you, but try to also understand that right now with all the planetary energies, it's much better that you kind of sit back and reevaluate how your investment strategy is going on. That would be the best way to actually use up the energy of this retrograde, because it kind of makes you reevaluate, reconsider, and that sort of stuff. So if you want to use it in the best way, I would say that try to reevaluate how you're investing your money right now, especially into riskier instruments if that is the case. And then what else can happen is that your communication with your romantic interests or your partners or in romantic relationships can turn haywire. So you might be wanting to say something, your partner construes it as something else, and then miscommunication happens, and then fights can happen, and you might utter something which you can't take back and hurt someone's feelings. So kind of be aware of those things, because that is a very likely probability to come about, especially when I also speak about Venus moving into that house. So you'll understand why I'm saying this. Also, if you have children, this is also an energy that shows that your relationship with your children can turn kind of sour right now, wherein your communication, again the same thing, how you're communicating with them kind of it won't be as agreeable with them. So you need to be aware of how your communication is happening with your children and how to make best of this energy right now. You see, Jupiter retrograde right now is happening in your 11th house, And this Jupiter retrograde is putting a direct aspect onto your Mercury retrograde. And the Mercury retrograde, in fact, is also putting an aspect onto the Jupiter retrograde because it's on the 5th, 11th axis. So what this can mean for you is the fact that 11th house is a house of like expanded financial gains, and 5th house, as I said, is also relating to riskier investments and how you gain from that. So you have to be extremely careful of how your investment strategies are happening, how you're dealing with your portfolio, kind of reevaluate what is the limit of risk that you're willing to take. Is that going to help in your longer goals of how you want to be financially independent or whatever that is? So be very, very careful of how you're able to do that. And even though right now your analysis might not be as good as it could have been if the Mercury energy of retrogression is not there, but try to sit back and really evaluate rather than act on something, because this is not the great energy to start something new right now, because you could face roadblocks or stuff like that. So that is something that definitely is playing in tandem with that 5th, 11th axis. So be careful regarding that. Don't be overly critical or overly optimistic about it. Be kind of pragmatic and sort of neutral about it, and kind of move back and assess and reevaluate how you're going to go about your investment strategy. Next transit that is taking place is Sun when it moves into Virgo on the 17th of September. So already Mercury retrograde energy is there in Virgo. Now Sun also accompanies this. Now to understand here which out of these two planets is going to impact this conjunction more, it's very clearly visible that because Mercury is its own sign, so Mercury's energy is going to trump everything else. You might have a creative block right now. You might also get overly critical about your own creative projects. You are going to really evaluate even your personality, because the 5th house sort of has energy of the sign of Leo, which is ruled by Sun. Sun is all about your personality. So you can also sit and kind of evaluate about your personality, about the things that you find fulfillment from. So you can also sit back and kind of critically think about those things. And again, as I said before, Mercury retrograde right now in your 5th house, as it was impacted by Jupiter retrograde, the same thing is happening with Sun as well. So again, the same thing. Don't be overly critical of yourself when it comes to your creative abilities, how you're looking at your personality right now, or your overall, let's say, mission or goal in life. Not everything can be figured out at once. So kind of give yourself the grace to sit back and reevaluate what your strategies are regarding that as well. And you can also sort of, maybe your romantic interests can also kind of come in conflict with your acquaintances or your network circle. It can be a possibility that your partner or your romantic whatever prospects that you have is not someone who is well liked by your friends group or your acquaintances who know about it. So that is also something that can become a possibility. Then the next transit that is taking place on the 24th of September is Venus in Virgo. So now 3 planets, as I mentioned before, are all going to be present in this 5th house in the sign of Virgo. Again, Venus, when it comes into the sign of Virgo, is considered to be debilitated. And what that means is that because Venus is the signification of love, right? It's a signification of romance. And the sign of Virgo is not related to romance and love. It's a very practical earth sign that kind of analyzes everything, is very critical about stuff. So it's very contradictory, conflicting energies. So again, we see that rather than any change happening in the dynamic happening in the conjunction of the 5th house, again we see that Mercury retrograde has the greatest signification of energies happening in this house. So the impact that Mercury retrograde is having right now is going to also color the impact of Venus and Sun that is happening in your 5th house. And as I said before, Venus right now going into your 5th house could generally have been like a very good omen. Your love relationships could become more invigorated, but because it's happening in the sign of Virgo, it's not going to be that. And also because all this retrograde energy is impacting Venus here, so it's very well going to be something along the lines of, as I mentioned before, that the general likability of your partner might not be present with your friends group or something of that sort. So it's very likely that all the other pressure that is happening regarding everything else in your life, you can't pay as much attention to your love relationships, and that can create conflicts that can also maybe possibly lead to breakups and some kind of issues in your relationship. All the other planets that are right now transiting, be it Rahu, Ketu, or Jupiter retrograde, or Saturn retrograde, every video has been made, and I would be linking that in the end of the video. There's a playlist that you can see, and everything will be linked there. Also, I'll be mentioning this in the description box below, and you can check that out as well. I hope you have a great month of September. Please let me know if the predictions resonated with your experience. Thanks so much for watching. Gemini natives, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. The main transits that are happening are of the faster moving planets, which is Mercury, Sun, and Venus. And all these three planets are changing its sign cohesively from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. So we're going to go and see how these three planets moving into a different sign is going to change the significations of the outcome for you in this month of September, in tandem and correlation to all the other transits that have been taking place and are continuing in this month. So starting off with the transit that took place at the precipice of the previous month, on the 31st of August, Venus transited into the sign of Leo. So Mercury and Sun were already transiting in this sign. So this whole conjunct energy of Mercury, Sun, and Venus is taking place in your third house in the sign of Leo. So what this tells us is that also Mercury is like your ascendant lord. What this tells us is that, you can feel that you are right now feeling extremely invigorated when it comes to self-effort and your confidence. You can feel like right now, I'm confident in my abilities, especially because the third house also has similar energies to the sign of Gemini, so which is relating to communication especially. So you can feel quite communicatively adept at being able to, talk about what you are kind of thinking, what you're feeling. And this especially can also show, especially with the Venus being transiting through this sign and house, can show that, you might actually end up liking someone and connecting with someone over like the internet or something of that sort. So, actually talking to someone new on the online platforms, be it anything of your choice, and being able to strike up a conversation. You're going to seem extremely riveting during this conversation. You're going to be in your mojo. Also, when it comes to self-effort and self-confidence, you're feeling extremely sure of yourself. So all of that kind of boils down into feeling extremely confident about yourself and, radiating off that and people feeling attracted to it. So this is the sort of energy that is giving when it comes to this whole conjunction happening in your third house. So what happens next is that, quite unfortunately for you, on 10 September, Mercury is going retrograde in the sign of Virgo. So what happens here is that your ascendant lord is going into the fourth house, but it is going retrograde. So as I said before, you are feeling extremely communicatively adept, and you were able to communicate everything optimally. Now what happens here is that Mercury significations turn opposite to what it would have been in the sign of Virgo. And Mercury works really well in the sign of Virgo because it is its own ruled sign, right? So what happens here now is that rather than you being extremely analytical, extremely critically aware of how you're thinking about things, and being perfection oriented, about being very eloquent when it comes to speaking, all these significations kind of turn upside down. So what you will feel like, especially because this is happening in your fourth house, you can sort of start to feel like how you're communicating with your family kind of turns upside down. Now what happens here is that you can start to feel some shift, especially with your dynamic, especially with your mother. So what can happen is whatever you're communicating can get misconstrued by your mother, and that can sort of, have you guys kind of go back and forth regarding something. That can become a possibility. Also, you can kind of feel like conversation between you and your family has turned quite critical, and it's not constructively critical, but it's kind of bordering on accusatory critical. So that can also be something that you might start to feel when Mercury goes retrograde in your fourth house. So the sense of comfort and the sense of confidence that you were feeling in yourself, like before this transit started on the 10th of September, kind of goes backwards. So you are again starting to sit and contemplate what is happening right now, right? Especially when something goes south in your very close and intimate relationships, like your parents or your family, you kind of start to disassociate from everything else as well, because that is something, because that relationship is quite integral. You sort of start to think about everything else as well, like what else is not making sense in my life at this point. So that sort of energy will start to boil over as the further conjunctions and energies start to migrate into this house. So the next transit that happens on the 17th of September is the transit of Sun in Virgo. Now, before I start to discuss this, what we need to also acknowledge is that Jupiter retrograde right now happening through your 10th house is putting a direct aspect onto your Mercury retrograde. And the same thing is happening where the Mercury retrograde is putting a direct aspect onto your 10th house. So this clearly shows that there is going to be some push and pull energy regarding how much energy you're able to, kind of cull out between your work as well as your family and home. So you're going to feel torn and, pull towards two different directions, and that sort of energy. So you can feel like, neither am I completely satisfied with work because, retrograde energy again, and neither am I feeling completely satisfied at home. So it can, kind of set off like an existential crisis trigger in you, wherein you're like, what is happening? Nothing kind of is kind of making sense right now. So that sort of energy can get exacerbated, and you can become quite critical about how you're dealing with things at even your home, or be it your professional matters as well. So you need to take a step back and just sort of reevaluate what your preferences and what is more important to you at this point. Not that you have to make a choice between these two things, but just like you don't have unlimited energy, right? So what are you sort of going to dedicate your energy towards right now productively? Now, coming back to the Sun's transit into Virgo, again, as I mentioned before, the same thing is happening. Jupiter is again putting its aspect here, and Sun moving into the fourth house would have been a good omen, but because Mercury is more powerful here in this conjunction because it's in its own sign, Sun doesn't hold a chance to kind of negate any effect that Mercury is making right now. So it's going to be impacted by whatever significations Mercury retrograde is trying to set off. So again, the same thing, kind of conflicts with your family. There can even be some sort of legal issue that kind of gets developed in your family, even maybe because of some property issue, like something relating to some fixed assets like real estate, and some legal issues coming about in your family because of that reason. That can also become a huge possibility, and that sort of energy amplifies and magnifies itself when Sun also transits into the fourth house. So I think, as I told you before, that kind of make a choice of where you want your energies to be kind of pitching towards. I feel like as all these planets, like which is Mercury, Venus and Sun, start to move towards your fourth house, I think you will start to feel that inclination towards trying to understand and figure out what is happening at home first with your family and with your intimate like connections and stuff like that. So next transit that happens is on the 24th of September, which is the Venus in Virgo transit. So Venus basically is considered to be debilitated in the sign of Virgo. That is because Venus is all about love and romance, and the sign of Virgo is not, right? The sign of Virgo is all about, let's say, it's quite about being critical. It's also about being quite realistic about stuff because it's a earth sign. And so it has very contradicting energies to the significations and energies of Venus. So what happens here is that there could be some sort of maybe renovation that had to take place in your house. Maybe there's a joint house of some sort or something, and that renovation or the prospect of it is causing some issues. And even the general pliability and the general connectedness of all the family units sort of gets to deteriorate with all the pressure that is taking place with regards to whatever dispute is happening within the family. So these are the sort of energies that can come about. Also, as I mentioned before, that the romantic relationships that you must have started and that you were feeling quite great about sort of set back, and you kind of start to think critically even about those things, even if it might have been going really great. But you will start to think about the fact that how that is fitting into your life right now, especially with everything else kind of going haywire. So I would say kind of lay low, let this sort of magnified energy in your fourth house sort of dissipate. And also with the other planets that are taking place, be it the Jupiter retrograde or the Saturn retrograde or the Rahu Ketu axis and its transit that is happening right now, it's all mentioned and already made in in the previous video. So I will be linking that in the end of this video as a playlist, or you can also watch it in the links that I would be giving in the description box. Also, when it comes to the Mars transit, I feel you would have understood that I haven't spoken about this, and that is because I have made a very recent video regarding this, wherein I've gone in depth and explained how this Mars's transit is going to impact you. I would really recommend you watch that, and that can give you a understanding of how this transit is going to work for you, especially because it's a very critical and integral transit taking place over 8 months, well into 2023. So its effect is quite integral. Watch that as well, and I hope that gives you a better understanding as to what kind of significations are going to come about in this month for you. I really hope you and your family kind of tide through this hard time, and I hope September doesn't suck for you. Please let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with your experience. Thanks for watching. Cancer natives, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the three main planets which are transiting in this month are the faster moving planets of Mercury, Sun and Venus. So we are going to see how the cumulative energy of these three planets moving from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo is going to impact you, and we are going to corroborate all the other transits that have been taking place from before this month and are continuing to do so even in this month, and sort of paint a picture of what the month of September is going to look like for you. So let's start with the first transit that took place in this month, or let's say the precipice of the previous month, which is on the 31st of August. Venus transited into the sign of Leo. Mercury and Sun were already present in the sign of Leo. So this shows that all of this accumulated energy in your second house, right? Now, what is quite an interesting thing is second house is like the house of finances. It's the house of your secured assets, right? It's the house where money sort of becomes a tool of stability. Now, Venus being the planet of materialistic pleasure and let's say monetary significations, when this planet comes into this house, it shows that there is a possibility of you actually getting better savings, being able to be more financially secured in your finances right now. So this sort of energy also plays in tandem with the transit of Mars into the sign of Taurus that is taking place in your 11th house. And I have made a dedicated video about this transit quite recently. I would definitely urge you to watch that, because in that video I've explained how this transit is going to impact you, and this is quite a substantial transit because it is taking place over the period of almost 8 months, well into 2023. So I think it would give you quite a understanding of what the flavor of this transit is going to impact, in the near future right now. So the Mars transit, basically in crux, the Mars transit happening in your 11th house shows that you are right now focused on creating better financial opportunities for yourself so that you can have exponential financial gains. And that energy playing in with the Venus's transit in the second house and all the other planets as well shows that you will be able to do so to a very large extent. But you have to be careful not to go overboard and sort of, risk being so overly materialistic at this point that, any other signification of your familial values, of your familial bonding sort of doesn't take a back seat regarding that. So you have to be careful of those sort of significations. Now, the next transit that is taking place, which is quite an integral one again, is on 10th of September. Mercury retrograde is happening in the sign of Virgo. So Mercury rules the sign of Virgo, and it works at its best in the sign of Virgo because when Mercury is in the sign of Virgo, what happens is that you can expect the significations to come about in the way of you being quite eloquent with your speaking. Also, you can also expect things like being quite perfectionist, also quite critically thinking, and your analytical prowess is also quite good when Mercury is in the sign of Virgo. But all these good sort of positive significations turn haywire because it's in the retrograde motion, right? So what comes about here is the fact that also another thing is Mercury is the planet of communication. It's the planet of your intellect, and that being in the sign of Virgo in your third house, and third house significations talk about communication itself. So the dead giveaway just from the beginning is that you have to be careful how you are right now communicating regarding, let's say, your interests, be it just communication in general. There's a very high likely probability that whatever you say right now can be misconstrued and taken otherwise. So you have to be extremely careful of how you are communicating what you want to say and being able to not create more chaos to the confusion that is already present because of this transit. This can also show a possibility that you might actually create these sort of communicational issues with your younger siblings, and that can sort of create a wedge between your bonding. So that is a highly likely possibility. Also, be careful of expressing your views on the internet. You can see some sort of criticism or backlash coming because of it. So just be careful of how or what you speak on the internet as well. Now, what happens here also is that you can feel like the self-assuredness in your abilities sort of starts to dissipate. So you kind of start to become critical about your self-prowess, your self-confidence, your ability to believe in yourself. So you start to doubt your own self. Kind of that energy starts to happen, which you have to be careful about, especially because Cancer is a sign which is so emotional because it's ruled by the planet of emotions, Moon. If you start to think that way, you are going to, sort of spiral downward into that whole process of thinking negatively. So kind of keep your criticism of your, abilities in check and not, go down that road of thought process. Now, the next transit that is taking place is, before that, another thing which needs to be seen is that Jupiter retrograde, which is happening in your 9th house, right, is directly aspecting this Mercury retrograde. And in turn, the Mercury retrograde also is directly aspecting your Jupiter retrograde. So what this tells us also, because it's happening in the 3rd and 9th axis, right? 3rd house and 9th house. So 3rd, 3-9 axis. So what this tells us is that you need to be positive right now. See, the Jupiter is the sign of positivity. It is the sign of optimism, right? Now Jupiter is already going retrograde, so it shows that the feelings of pessimism can start to seep in, And now, as I explained before, Mercury in the sign of Virgo right now also being retrograde shows that you are being unnecessarily critical of yourself. So the main process that comes about in this scene is that you need to be careful of how you are thinking about yourself, and not to turn too negative or too critical about yourself, to work around things and just give yourself the grace to sort of figure out, reconsider, realign your values and how you're thinking about yourself right now. So that is quite an important thing that you need to remember. Next, as I had started talking about it before, so the next transit that takes place on the 17th of September is the transit of Sun into Virgo. So Sun has now again joined Mercury in the third house, right? So a very easy thing to understand which planet is right now here going to be more powerful in its conjunction is that, see, the sign which we are talking about here is Virgo, right? And Virgo is ruled by the sign of Mercury. So it's very easy to understand that Mercury right now is going to, its significations are going to be more powerful on any of the conjunctions that are going to happen in this house right now. So Sun is also going to follow in the steps of the kind of precedence that Mercury is setting right now. So again, the same things as I mentioned before, the thoughts of how you are sort of tying in your efforts, your confidence with your identity, how you're able to sort of, kind of realign your own personality with your efforts. You have to be careful of not to turn too critical about those things. Don't think that just because you are not able to do certain things right now that you would like to, or you're not able to do them to a quality that you would like to do it, that it's somehow impacting who you really are as a person. So those sort of thinking processes can be shown when this sort of conjunction happens in your third house, because Sun generally, if it would have gone into the third house, shows that you would have been feeling great about your self efforts and stuff like that. But as I explained, Mercury is the most important planet in this conjunction right now. So what happens is simply that your self efforts become a huge issue, your self confidence becomes a huge issue, and that is then tying into how you are viewing your whole personality itself, right? So that is something that you have to try to not exacerbate and try to get overwhelmed with those feelings of critical analysis of your own self and your personality, right? So that is what we can see to come about here. And next, the transit that is taking place on the 24th of September is the transit of Venus into Virgo. So now all the three planets are here, right? And as I explained, any which way, Mercury is going to be the most powerful planet here, right? Now, Venus also coming into the sign of Virgo is a little bothersome, because Venus is a planet which also signifies love and romance. And the sign of Virgo is not a planet that is not a sign, that you can say that would generally be considered to be romantic or love oriented. It's a sign which is quite pragmatic, it's a sign which is quite realistic, and it's a sign which is quite critical. So these are all very contradicting energies to what the significations of Venus are like. So what we can see here is that your relations with your siblings, right, kind of turn southwards, and you sort of have to go around trying to build the pieces back of whatever rifts have caused you to sort of have a falling out or have some misconstrued words be the cause of some fights. So that can be the sort of psyche that you can be rolling in right now, sort of doing damage control regarding whatever relationship issues you are having with your siblings. Also, again, because Venus is a planet of, let's say, self-appreciation, it's a planet of love even for yourself. Becoming debilitated in the sign of Virgo, again, as I said before, shows that self-efforts, you don't feel like your efforts are kind of amounting to what you would want it to look like. But what you have to realize is you can't really control the outcome of things, right? You can only control how much you can put into the process, and the outcome will sort itself out. So please remember that, and don't be overtly critical or harsh with yourself, right? And see, even if you sort of get into some communication online with someone, it cannot be deemed to be overtly positive right now because of all the energies that are right now in the third house. So I would say refrain from actually trying to have a very serious intentional communication online. So that is one of the other things that I see because of the Venus have like transit in the third house. Also, this debilitated energy of Venus shows that there is some difficulty regarding your romantic relationships, and that energy is again being reiterated because of the Saturn retrograde happening in your 7th house of marriage and romantic partnerships. So I would say kind of manage your expectations regarding how you are viewing your romantic relationships right now, because in this phase of the transits you can actually retreat and sort of recoup and reconsider your relationships, even, right? Even if it's as serious as being in a marriage or something of that sort. So right now the best way you can use these energies is to literally sit back and kind of reevaluate rather than trying to force yourself to be action oriented and oh my god, why is my work not actually manifesting into the kind of outcome that I wanted to. So rather than doing that, I would say kind of pull back and assess what can be rectified. Rather than being just critical, be constructively critical with yourself, so that whatever you're doing at least has some sort of beneficial access to the outcome that you want to have. Also, regarding all the other transits that are taking place, be it Saturn retrograde or Jupiter retrograde, I'm not going deeply into it because I've covered these in the previous videos and I will be linking them in the description box. I would also be linking the whole playlist where all of these transits have been explained in detail in the end of the video. So you can watch that as well. And I hope you have a great month of September. Please let me know in the comment section if any of the predictions resonated with your experience. Thank you so much for watching. Leo natives, for you, how the month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the major transits that are happening in this month are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Sun, and Venus. So this accumulated energy of these three planets being conjunct in the sign of Leo then moves into the sign of Virgo, and they continue their conjunction even in that house and that sign. So we are going to see how this transit is going to impact you, as well as take into consideration all the other transits that are taking place that have continued from the previous months and well into this month as well, and in tandem try to see how these significations align and what this means for you in the month of September. So let's start with the first transit, which is the transit of Venus in Leo that happened at the precipice of the previous month on 31st of August. So this transit of Venus in Leo is taking place in your first house, wherein Sun and Mercury were already present, right, from the previous month's transits. So what we see here is that you being Leo, right, and Sun already being present in the first house where it finds its directional strength and the most amount of beneficial energy. And all planets that are right now conjunct in your first house are sort of positive planets, right? Mercury is a positive planet, Sun is slightly malefic but still positive, and Venus is also a very positive connotational and significational planet. So this shows that right now in your first house of self, you are feeling quite reassured, right? Leos are not short of having confidence, right? That is one thing that we can surely understand because they're ruled by the planet of Sun. So you are right now feeling in your element, right? You feel like you can conquer anything you set your mind to right now. and you're feeling quite great about yourself, be it your appearance, be it your personality, and that whole energy sort of exacerbates and works in your favor when Venus moves into the first house. Because what happens when Venus moves into your first house in the sign of Leo is that your perception, the vibes, let's say, that you give to people is going to be very pleasing. So people are going to find you quite attractive right now, and they're going to pay extra attention to you, and they're going to listen to everything you sort of say because they're going to find you extremely pleasing even with how you speak right now, right? So all of these positive connotations are happening in your first house, which is a great omen, right? Now, what happens next is with the next transit, that is the transit of Mercury in Virgo but retrograde. So Mercury is moving into your second house and in the sign of Virgo. Now, Virgo is a sign which Mercury rules itself. So the general significations of what would happen if we would find Mercury transiting in Virgo, it would have been something along the lines of, let's say, you would become extremely eloquent in your speaking, your abilities of perfectionism would come about, you would be quite analytical and critical in your thinking processes. So all of these things could have been expected. Now what happens is, this is a retrograde motion, so it's all going backwards. So what you can expect here is, as eloquent you were before this transit is all going to start to, turn completely opposite on its head when Mercury goes into the sign of Virgo in your second house. And the second house is the house of speech, right? So this clearly shows that there can be some faux pas and some sort of blunder that happens regarding your communication right now, which you have to be extremely careful about. You have to be careful how you're wording your sentiments, how you're wording your thought processes. You have to be careful to not give others a chance to, sort of misconstrue what you're speaking and kind of run with that narrative. Especially because that mistake can, kind of jeopardize you, because Saturn right now is retrograde in your sixth house. And as I've explained in that video in detail, I've made a video on Saturn retrograde before. I will be linking that in the description box. Also, you can see that at the end of this video, there's a whole playlist that I would be linking. You can check that out in this playlist as well. But I would say, because of this Mercury retrograde in your second house, you have to be careful of how you're going to put your ideas across, right? Because if you you're not aware of how you are kind of communicating with people, people can take your words and run with that in a completely different narrative, which can come to bite you in the ass, because there is a huge probability that maybe your colleagues are sort of like, there's a chance that they can be plotting behind your back regarding certain issues, right, which you are not aware of. And they could be, miscommunicating and kind of creating that sort of drama around whatever you're speaking, even if you don't intend it that way. So be careful regarding how you're speaking right now. Also, another signification of the second house is money, is your secured assets, is your safety, is your stability. So Mercury going here shows that you have to be careful of how you are right now looking at your secured assets, how you are making decisions regarding your savings, because this directly plays into the energy that is right now exhibiting by the Mars's transit into the sign of Taurus, which is happening in your 10th house. So I have made a detailed video about the Mars transit in Taurus, and I would be linking that, as I mentioned before, in the description box, or I would also be linking it in the end of this video in the playlist that has all these videos, already the separate videos that I have been making on Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, and the Mars transit. And I would definitely urge you to watch the Mars transit video, especially which I've made recently, because this transit is quite significant, as it is going to go about for 8 months almost, well into 2023. So this is going to really give you an idea of how things are going to turn out for you regarding this transit. So be careful regarding how you are managing your money right now. Don't try to be impulsive with your ideas. Don't try to get creative with, what you're trying to do. Be sure of the kind of decisions you're making. If you really want to use the energy of Mercury retrograde in your second house right now, kind of sit back and look at how much savings you're really doing. Is there a possibility of you increasing your savings in case? Are you optimally being able to save your money or not? Right? So rather than doing something, kind of sit back and figure out what you are doing right now. That is going to be the best way you can play into the energies of Mercury retrograde happening into your second house. So also another signification here is that how you are communicating with your family, especially regarding their values and familial beliefs, is extremely important, because you can turn quite critical about it, you can turn quite combative about it, you can turn quite aggressive about it, which you have to refrain from doing. And again, as I mentioned before, this energy again plays into the Mars's transit in the sign of Taurus, right? So you have to be extremely careful of not being overtly critical of your family's beliefs and values. Maybe you can't change them, right? So just, leave it aside and don't try to be combative about it. So the next transit that is taking place is the transit of Sun in Virgo, right? And before I begin with that, I would first say that, and bring your attention to the fact that this Jupiter retrograde that is happening in your 8th house is directly aspecting your Mercury retrograde, and in turn Mercury retrograde is aspecting that Jupiter retrograde. So what this sort of energy shift and transference shows that, and see, the second 8th house axis is all about money. It's about your secured assets, and it's about also the 8th house is all about like benefiting from other people's money, right? So this whole thing talks about the fact that how you are looking at money right now needs to be extremely analytical rather than critical. So think about that, and also there might be a possibility that you can enrich yourself financially because of some other person's assets, and you need to be sure that you are on good terms with those people, especially if it is your family. As I mentioned before, that there can be instances where you are extremely critical with them right now. So work into that aspect, try to be more positive, try to be more optimistic about it rather than more pessimistic or more critical, because that will come easily, being pessimistic and critical right now. But you have to try to turn and be more optimistic about certain things, especially when it comes to your finances. So that is there. Then, as I was talking about the transit of Sun in Virgo, which happens on the 17th of September, so Sun now moves into the second house as well. The general significations would have been really positive, but why I don't think that is going to be the case right now is because in this conjunction of, let's say, Mercury, even Venus, when I talk about it, and Sun, the most important planet in this conjunction right now is Mercury retrograde, because the sign of Virgo itself is ruled by Mercury and it is transiting through its sign itself. So the energies of Mercury retrograde are going to be the most effective over everything else that is happening in this transit. So you have to be quite analytical about how you're looking at your savings, how you're looking at your secured assets, how you're able to, monetize on this sort of stuff. And I would say also sort of be careful regarding how your dietary habits are kind of influencing your health in general, because the Saturn retrograde in the 6th house doesn't bode really great news about your health. So, be careful of how your eating habits are sort of, influencing your health in general. And that also again plays into the Mars's transit into the Taurus sign, and how that also aligns with, how you're eating, what sort of habits is that inculcating in your health and stuff like that. Also, your focus is right now going to be very much onto your family and your savings, right? Your monetary savings. So focus on that. Try to, realign how things were before the Mercury retrograde started this whole thing. So kind of try to maintain balance there and don't be extra critical, but kind of analytical, and take a step back and just reevaluate the things rather than trying to be at the offensive of everything. Next transit that is taking place on the 24th of September is the transit of Venus into the sign of Virgo. And Venus now moves into your second house itself. Venus is a planet that shows monetary prowess, that shows materialism, right? And being in the house which talks about savings shows that you can actually enrich yourself. So there's a possibility that the savings that you're making actually work out in your favor. But why I am not overtly optimistic about this prospect is because, Venus turns debilitated in the sign of Virgo. So what that means is that basically Virgo is not really aligned with the energies of Venus. So this can also show the possibility of the fact that your monetary savings right now can kind of cause you troubles. And this can also sort of relate with how your family is looking at your financial decisions. There can be a possibility that your family itself is critical of your financial decisions, and that can be the reason why the energy of aggressive combativeness and things like that ensue. So be careful regarding that. And also, I think if you are in a relationship already, this energy is not greatly positive about the prospects of romance, and you need to be careful of how you are speaking to your partner and not to be overtly judgmental or critical, or just don't bring your partner down right now. Don't be overtly critical of their peculiarities. Mainly, I would say the whole energy for you this month especially is going to be all about how you're dealing with your money, how you're dealing with the financial decisions you're making, and how you have to sort of turn towards making safer and stable choices of finances, and how you're able to parlay that into greater savings. So kind of concentrate on that and remain cordial with your family. And every other transit that I have spoken about, be it Saturn retrograde or the Jupiter retrograde, even the Mars's transit, all of that will be linked in the description box. Also, you will be able to find it in the end of the video in the playlist, as I'd mentioned before. And I hope you have a great month of September, and let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with your experience. Thanks for watching. Virgo natives, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. So the main transits that are happening in this month are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Sun, and Venus. So we're going to look at how this accumulated energy of this conjunction happening in Leo and then, moving into the sign of Virgo is going to impact you in the month of September, and how all the other transits that have been taking place from before this month and are going to continue in this month are sort of playing into the energies that are happening in this month of the transits of the planets that I have already spoken about. So we're going to see how cumulatively all these aspects of all the planets is going to manifest for you in September. So let's start with the first transit, which happened at the precipice of the previous month, which was 31st of August, when Venus moved into the sign of Leo. So Venus is getting accompanied with Mercury and Sun, which were already transiting in the sign of Leo, right? Prior to that 31st of August. So we see that this accumulated energy happening in your 12th house. the thing that kind of is a little concerning is the fact that Virgo, because is a sign which is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury being in your 12th house of losses doesn't extremely bode really great news. So I would say because of this planet, and Mercury is also sort of, Mercury in Pisces is debilitated, and that same sort of energy is in the 12th house. So I would say Venus conjoining here sort of gives you this perspective of isolating yourself. It can sort of give you that perspective of, looking inwards rather than outwards. You can also sort of be quite compromising, quite self-sacrificing right now because of the Venus movement into your 12th house as well. So also because Virgo itself is quite a service oriented sign, it comes quite naturally to them to be, self-sacrificial. So you have to be careful to, not go overboard on that whole energy of self-sacrificing and, compromising and stuff like that when it comes to your love equations, especially. Also, this Venus's transit into your 12th house with the already existing energies in your 12th house of the Mercury and Sun shows that there is a prospect of you actually traveling long distances, maybe even to foreign places. And that sort of thing is going to kind of put you in a position where you actually come in contact with certain people that you can start some sort of romantic equation with. That is a possibility as well. And this possibility of actually traveling and making longer distance travels comes about and reiterates itself because of also the Mars's transit into your 9th house. So, and I've spoken a lot about this Mars transit in the sign of Taurus, and I would love for you to go and check that video out, which is quite recently released. And this is quite integral because this transit is taking place over the period of 8 months, well into 2023. So it would be great if you could, understand how this transit is basically playing into all the energies and how this is going to manifest for you well into 2023. So that is going to be linked in the description box, and also I will be linking that in a playlist at the end of this video, which you can also see for easy access to all the transits, be it the Saturn transit or Saturn retrograde transit or the Jupiter retrograde transit. So all of that will also be linked there, so you can watch that as well. Now, as we move on to the next transit, which is quite monumental and significant for you especially, is on the 10th of September, Mercury becomes retrograde in the sign of Virgo, which is your sign. So, as I'd mentioned before that, Mercury being in the 12th house does not bode great news. I'm sorry to say, but this doesn't bode even greater news. Like, it's not good. So, what happens here is that because it's your ascendant lord and it that rules your sign, so this sign itself and this planet itself going retrograde shows that you are right now doubting yourself, your own personality, what you bring to the table, your own confidence, your own even maybe appearance is something that you're being quite critical about. You can sort of recontemplate and sort of criticize and sort of get into that whole headspace of, how it is possible for Virgos to be quite hard on themselves. And this energy of Mercury retrograde kind of reiterates that you can right now kind of be, in a compulsion of overtly criticizing yourself, being overtly judgmental about yourself, especially when it comes to your personality and appearance and even health to a certain extent. So you have to be careful regarding that. And you have to also sort of be on the fence regarding your health, especially I would say when it comes to your eating habits and your digestion. So there could be some sort of back and forth happening regarding how your eating habits are influencing your digestive system, and how that is kind of exacerbating some issues right now for you regarding your health. So you have to be careful regarding that, and that is also discussed in the Mars transit video. Do definitely give that a watch. And what else I could also see when it comes to this transit of Mercury retrograde is that how generally analytical and critical in your thinking you can be, quite realistic about it. You might not have that sort of ability right now. So rather than actually being able to check yourself when you are kind of starting to think about the worst, right, looking at the things from the worst perspective analysis, so you might not be able to check yourself at that point. So you have to be careful regarding that. Be sure of how your mental health is at this point, because Mercury kind of also rules our thought processes. So this kind of being retrograde in the sign of Virgo shows that it cannot be very positive for your mental health. So be careful regarding that as well. And I would say also kind of concentrate on how you're able to communicate right now with people around you, because your communication might not come out as eloquently or as easily perceptible as it generally does. So there is a possibility of people misconstruing what you're saying and kind of, being weirdly critical about the things that you say. So be careful regarding that as well. Now, what happens here is that the Jupiter retrograde transit, which is happening in your 7th house, right? This transit is aspecting the transit of Mercury retrograde. And in turn, Mercury retrograde right now is aspecting your 7th house. So what this shows is that, as I mentioned before, the tendency of this self-sacrificial lamb that you are kind of, flowing into right now, kind of check yourself with that. Kind of take a step back, because this is the best way you can use your, Mercury retrograde energy. Take a step back and see how you're able to value your own self right now. How are you able to love yourself right now? How are you able to serve yourself first, right? Because you cannot pour into someone's cup when your own cup, or let's say whatever, is empty. So you have to be careful of not overextending yourself for others to an extent where there's nothing left for you. So that is the sort of energy that, you have to be careful regarding. And you have to be optimistic about your own self. You cannot go into that aspect of that downward spiral where everything kind of becomes overwhelming, and because of the critical thought process you sort of develop about your own abilities. So don't let that happen. Now, the next transit that is taking place is the transit of Sun into the sign of Virgo. And this is happening in your 1st house. So generally, when Sun would transit into the 1st house, I would definitely say that, you start to feel more self-assured, you start to feel more self-confident, you start to feel even better about yourself. But I wouldn't say that is going to be necessarily the case, because in this conjunction that is going to happen eventually, when I also discuss about the Venus's transit, Mercury retrograde reigns supreme, because Virgo is a sign which is ruled by the planet of Mercury, right? So the ascendant lord coming into its own house, right, shows that there is a greater aspect of its impact onto any other planet that is coming in conjunction with it right now. So all the things that I mentioned with regards to your Mercury retrograde is going to color the impact of even the Venus and Sun transiting into this house. So what this shows us with the Sun's transit, at least right now, is the fact that your thought processes right now are going to be extremely critical in regards to your own personality, in regards to your own confidence, in regards to how you are viewing yourself. And this can also maybe show the possibility of the fact that, because Jupiter retrograde is aspecting this house right now. So all the planets, which is Mercury, Venus, and Sun, all are getting impacted. So this can show that even maybe your partner is right now quite critical about you, right? About your personality, about maybe your appearance as well. You have to sort of, disassociate from that narrative and kind of figure out how you really first feel about yourself rather than taking other people's opinions and kind of running with that. So you have to be careful regarding those things. Kind of give yourself the grace to, not be as, don't be obsessed with being perfection oriented and being, productive all the time. It cannot be possible. You're human as well, even if you're Virgo. So you need to be careful of not holding yourself to such a huge and high standard that, that the fall from there is like inevitably steep. So give yourself the space to right now retreat and kind of work on your mental health, work on the issues that are bothering you right now about yourself. Peek inside and start to sort of peel by layer, any critical thinking processes you're having about yourself right now, which are not exactly constructive, right? Which are kind of turning to a destructive outcome. So that is something that I would definitely say when Sun is right now transiting in Virgo and how this is going to impact you. Now, the next transit that takes place is the transit of Venus in the sign of Virgo on the 24th of September. As I said before with Sun, generally when Venus moves into the first house, I would say that your presence starts to become extremely pleasing to other people. They might find you extremely attractive. Romance becomes even more invigorating in that experience. You start to look at yourself in a much better way. But again, as I mentioned before, Mercury retrograde trumps the impact of all the other things that are happening in this conjunction currently. So also on top of that, when Venus moves into the sign of Virgo, it is considered to go into its debilitation, which simply means that it doesn't work as well there. So this further shows the fact that you right now need to focus on not being critical about yourself, about your appearance, about the impact and the effect you're bringing to other people. You have to be right now focused on the fact that how am I able to pour into my own cup, right? How am I able to look at myself in not as critical and judgmental of a lens? And how I'm able to right now give myself the space to not be of service to everyone around me, but rather first to myself and start with loving myself first, because that is the greatest service of them all. So focus your energies on yourself right now, because all of these conjunction happening in your first house is directly pointing to the fact that you need to be your own best friend / whatever romantic partner first. You need to be there for yourself. Nobody else is going to be there for you in a very realistic sense. So, sort yourself out first. Look at your mental health. Look at the thought processes that you're having right now about yourself. Kind of be kinder to yourself rather than being as critical as you generally have the tendency to be, right? Now, all the other transits that are taking place in this month, be it the Saturn retrograde transit or the Jupiter retrograde transit and the Mars transit, as I mentioned before, all will be linked in the description box and also at the end of the video in the playlist that will be attached. So definitely give that a watch so that you can understand what are the significations that you can expect to come about with all of these transits as well. I hope you have a great month of September, and I hope you're able to work on yourself and give yourself the kindness and love that you so abundantly give everyone else. And let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with you and your experience. And thank you so much for watching. Libra natives, for you, how the month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the major transits that are happening in this month are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Sun. So we're going to see how the transit of these three planets from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo is going to look like for you, and how this energy change is also going to align with all the other transits that are taking place in this month, which have carried over from the previous months as well. And we're going to paint a picture of what you can expect to happen in the month of September. So let's start with the first transit, which happened at the precipice of the previous month, which is the transit of Venus into the sign of Leo on 31st of August. So we see that this transit is right now taking place in your 11th house, and it was already being accompanied by the transit of Mercury and Sun in the sign of Leo prior to 31st of August. So what we see here is that this cumulative energy of all the positive connotational planets in your 11th house. So the 11th house is your house of wish fulfillment. It's your house of exponential financial gains, and your ascendant lord, because being a Libra, you are ruled by the planet of Venus, and the planet of Venus is right now transiting through your 11th house, which is a great omen, because this shows that whatever financial profits that you had sort of been looking out for or expecting are going to actually work in your benefit, and you're going to receive that that monetary allotment of some expected financial gains. So it's a really great omen for that, and also it's a great omen for the fact that you can feel more connected with your friends. You can feel a sense of very outgoing energy, wherein you feel that your network circle or your acquaintances or your friends group, you're able to really gel well with them. And being the sign that likes to be pleasing and likable, so that sort of energy very cohesively gels in with your Venus transit in the sign of Leo in your 11th house. It shows that you're feeling confident about your abilities to connect with people. This can also show the possibility of your relationships with your elder siblings to actually become more harmonious, become more pleasant, and this sort of energy all in all is really good. So it's a very positive energy. But now what happens with the next transit is that on the 10th of September, Mercury becomes retrograde in the sign of Virgo in your 12th house. So the sign of Virgo is ruled by the planet of Mercury, right? So we understand that its significations would have been really positive if it was not retrograde at this point. So what kind of significations we could have expected to come about when Mercury transits through the sign of Virgo would have been something along the lines of being quite analytical, being quite pragmatic, being able to critically think about stuff, being quite perfection oriented, being very eloquent with your speaking. So all of this energy, because right now this planet is in retrograde, so it all turns backwards, right? So it's all going to have the opposite connotation of it. And see, the planet of Mercury gets debilitated in the sign of Pisces, which means that it is not as communicationary. See, Mercury is the planet of communication, right? Pisces has very different energies, and that is because Mercury is the planet of communication, and being in the sign of Pisces, its element of being able to communicate goes in the opposite way, because Pisces is a sign of isolation. It's a sign of intuition. It's a sign of, daydreaming and that sort of stuff. So it is a complete opposite connotation to it. Now, why I'm talking about Pisces here right now is because it's in the 12th house, and it has kind of very similar energies to the sign of Pisces. So we see that this is not a really great signification when it comes to your communicational abilities. So as I was telling you before that, you would have been feeling really great about how you're able to connect with people. As soon as this Mercury transits into Virgo in your 12th house in a retrograde motion, all of that is going to turn on its head. So you're going to start to feel to disassociate from people. You will start to feel the need to isolate yourself. You will start to feel the need to actually, uh, give yourself solitude and be able to recoup and recuperate. And there can also be a possibility that there might be some misconstrued words, that you speak something and somebody else basically understands it in a way which is much different than you intended it to be. So all of these energies will start to come about. Now, where I think this sort of communicational gap and the sort of lag in, cohesion of how you're right now communicating with people will affect you the most is at work. And why am I saying this is because the Jupiter retrograde that is taking place in your 6th house is directly impacting your 12th house. It's aspecting the Mercury retrograde. And in turn, the Mercury retrograde is also aspecting the Jupiter retrograde. So what this shows is that this communicational lag because of the Mercury retrograde in your 12th house right now can show that this communicational gap, or let's say miscommunication, basically will lead you to basically have people around you, let's say like your colleagues or people who you work with, basically kind of change the narrative of what you've spoken and kind of communicate it in a way which is much different to what you would like it to be, the message of whatever communication you're doing right now. So you have to be extremely careful of that, because that can inculcate even further feelings of, dejection and just feelings of wanting to not communicate with people, because, what's the point of communicating if everybody will continue to, misunderstand what you're saying or take your intentions otherwise. So that sort of feeling can come about. So you have to be careful regarding, not going into that trajectory and trying to just like work with the energies of Mercury retrograde right now. So I would say if you really want to assess, you should, I think if you really want to use how the Mercury retrograde's energies are right now portraying, I would say kind of look at how your communicational disassociation can cause you harm, right? And just kind of evaluate how you would like to go ahead and what kind of differences would you like to create in your own communicational channel and patterns. So that is something that I would definitely say. Also, you might be interested in traveling right now as well, and those plans can completely go haywire, especially with the Mercury retrograde thing happening. So you have to be quite precise with your planning and execution of any vacations if you're planning to take those. And I would say preferably sort of delay it if you can, but if you can't, then be extremely careful of. Now what happens is the next transit that is taking place is the transit of Sun in Virgo. So Sun joins the Mercury retrograde in your 12th house. Once again, what happens is all of these, as I again like further speak about the Venus's transit also, what we need to understand is all the conjunction that is happening in this house right now, the most important planet that is taking the significance over everything else that is happening in this house is Mercury retrograde right now, because it is in the sign of Virgo, right, which is ruled by Mercury. So it's in its own sign, so which makes it much more powerful, correct? Now what happens here is that with the Sun's conjunction with Mercury, all the things that I had spoken about, the fact that, everything which Mercury retrograde represents will be reiterated with Sun's transit there. So you have to be careful about your communicational channel. You have to be careful about if you're making travel plans, how you're planning that as well, how you're executing that. And also just like the feelings of disassociation, isolation, solitude kind of is something that can start to creep in, and you can start to like in a way isolate yourself from people, and that is something that you need to be careful about, because it can tie into how you're right now viewing your own personality and how you're viewing your own, maybe let's say just your own attributes quite negatively or quite critically. So that you need to be careful about, not to be extremely harsh on yourself right now. Also, like I would say with the Ketu's transit happening through your first house, it kind of shows the same sort of themes, which can get exacerbated right now because of the sun's transit through your 12th house, with of course the Mercury's energies there as well within the retrograde motion. So be careful regarding that as well. Don't try to spiral into this whole sense of isolating yourself, then being critical about yourself, overtly critical about yourself. And that is something that I would definitely say can happen with this sun's transit into the 12th house. Now what happens is, on the 24th of September, Venus finally moves into the sign of Virgo. And this is the last transit that is happening for this month. So what happens here is that Venus generally in the 12th house is considered to be exalted, right? So what this means is that it works at its best capacity, because Venus is a sign of love and romance. And the 12th house is a house of losses. Now you would think and be like, how is this really collaborating into a positive connotation? But generally, when you really love someone, you don't mind, sacrificing for them, or, actually, like, I won't say losing a sense of your own self, but I would say like you don't like basically quantify everything in a way. Like, you are not extremely critical about things, or you're not extremely analytical about stuff when it comes to love, right? You understand what I'm saying? So that sort of feeling, because of that whole connotation, Venus is considered to be working in its best capacity in the sign of Pisces, or let's say in the 12th house, right? Because similar energies. But now what happens here is Venus is here transiting in the sign of Virgo, which has completely opposite energies, and it's considered to be debilitated in this sign. So you see how widely contradicting these two energies are, right? So at one place we can consider Venus to be exalted in the 12th house, but at the other end we have to consider the fact that Venus is debilitated in the sign of Virgo. So this shows this dichotomy of, especially with this whole thing, I feel like right now you're sort of very much playing into the energies that are being exhibited by the Ketu Rahu axis in the 7th and 1st house. Rahu being in your 1st house clearly shows the fact that right now you're pouring your energy more and more into your relationships, right? And that sort of energy is kind of making you disassociate with your own self to a certain extent. You're making yourself your second priority. And this Venus's transit is kind of playing into that feeling. So you can feel even more burnt out with how service oriented, or how compromising, or how how much you can really give to your partner in a relationship. And that is something that you have to be extremely wary of, because there has to be an end to how much you're extending unless you actually receive something in the end as well. So this is a time where you can actually sit back and kind of try to evaluate even how much you are willing to give people in relationships, and just for the sake of keeping the peace, or just for the sake of having a pleasant dynamic, as Libras are known to like and thrive in. So kind of reevaluate those things. And I hope for you also, all the other planets, all the other transits that are taking place in this month, be it Saturn retrograde, be it Jupiter retrograde, or even the Mars's transit into the sign of Taurus. All of these videos have been released on the channel, and the most recent one, I would definitely urge you to watch, that is the Mars's transit in the sign of Taurus, because this is quite a significant transit which is going to go on for about 8 months, well into 2023. And this is surely going to tell you more about how financially significant this time is going to be for you. So definitely do give that a watch, and I hope the month of September turns out really well for you. And let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with your experience. Thank you so much for watching. Scorpio natives, for you, how the month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. So basically, the main planets that are transiting in this month are the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Sun. So we're going to evaluate how this cumulative energy of all of these three planets from the sign of Leo transiting into the sign of Virgo is going to impact you in the month of September. as well as we will also be considering all the other transits that have been taking place since the previous months well into this month as well, and kind of corroborate and paint a picture of what September's energies are going to look like for you. So we will start first with the transit that started at the precipice of the previous month, which is on the 31st of August. Venus moved into the sign of Leo. So what happens here is that this transit is happening through your 10th house, and Mercury and Sun were already present there prior to 31st of August. So all of this cumulative energy in your 10th house shows the clear fact that you are right now focusing on your career. You're right now focusing on your professional prospects. You are right now focusing on your relationships with your superiors. You are right now focusing on your public perception, and all of this is playing into your work and professional prospects. As all of these three planets, which are Mercury, Sun, and Venus, are all basically positive planets. So it shows that your work and your dedication towards your career and everything relating to your work prospects is going to turn out well. So your relationships are going to be extremely cordial with everyone at work. You are going to be perceived as a much likable person generally with this transit of Venus in your 10th house. Great energy for anything to be, manifested in your career prospects. So I would definitely say, keep working towards that, and that is surely going to be fruitful for you right now. Now the next transit that takes place, which is quite integral, is the Mercury Retrograde transit happening in the sign of Virgo, which is in your 11th house. So what happens here is that, as I mentioned, so before this Mercury's transit, you are going to be extremely likable and your persona is going to be extremely pleasing. So all of this is going to stay there for a while, but because of this Mercury's transit, a set of events is going to, get triggered, wherein 11th house is like your house of your larger network circle. It's your house of your friends. It's the house of your acquaintances, right? These are the things that get signified from the 11th house. So what can happen is your communicational channel with everyone sort of around you can take a weird angle, whereas to people can feel that you're becoming extremely critical of them, and that can sort of set off very weird dynamic between you and the people around you, right? So this can especially kind of impact how you are being perceived by your colleagues, and this can kind of initiate that dip from the high levels of positive public perception into some sort of like murky, questionable perceptions that people might start having about you. So that is something that I kind of see, and just kind of concentrate on how you're able to communicate to people without being overtly harsh or blunt with them, because sometimes even though you might be saying something unironically and it's just like it's a matter of fact, but people might not be ready to take it as such, because not everyone would have the same sort of sensibilities as you. So kind of be aware of that fact. And also what happens here is that 11th house is a house of your expanded financial gains. So what can also come about is that your communication about financial gains with people or something can get misconstrued, right? Or you might feel like the advice that people are giving you right now about, financial gains or something of that sort is not basically spoken in good faith. So that sort of thing can also come about, and you have to be extremely careful of that sort of dynamic being prevalent, because this energy kind of plays into the Mars's transit happening in your 7th house right now in the sign of Taurus, because this becomes quite an integral part of your financial stability. And this transit I have spoken about in detail in a very recent video. I would definitely urge you to watch it, because this is quite an integral transit that is taking place over the period of 8 months, well into 2023. So it would be a great signification for you to understand how monetarily, especially, this is going to, signify the possible outcomes for you in this extended period of time. So these are the kind of things. Now, what happens next is that Mercury retrograde from your 11th house is aspecting the Jupiter retrograde that is happening in your 5th house. And in turn, Jupiter retrograde is putting its aspect onto the Mercury retrograde. So, this transference of energy that is happening in your 5-11 axis shows that you can kind of become, how do I say this? You can kind of be perceived right now as the villain right now, and it just feels so weird to like, even your perception can take quite a dip right now, like from where you started off with the Venus's transit in your 10th house to this can kind of be like a drastic drop. So you have to be kind of prepared to have that sort of narrative be run around with people. And this can also show the possibility of you, let's say if you have some creative pursuits or something of that sort, and your larger network circle maybe is not as approving of it, or maybe they can get quite critical about it, and that kind of hinders your own optimism about the prospects of your creative pursuits. That can also be something that can come about with this transference of energy on the 5-11 axis between Mercury retrograde and Jupiter retrograde. And this can also kind of show the possibility of maybe some romantic relationships be actually interfered with because of other people's narrative and opinion about the kind of relationship you've developed, and that can also be a possibility with this transference of energy. You can actually kind of develop these weird, like, let's say, trust issues even because of what other people are right now saying to you, which can be quite critical of your partner. That is also a possibility as well. So these are all possibilities. It's not like necessary for it to happen, but these can be something that you can look out for, right? And this is further, it can be corroborated by your actual birth chart, right? This is just like a probability regarding the transits. It has to be further corroborated with your chart and your other things as well. So what happens next is that on the 17th of September, Sun is moving into the sign of Virgo. So it will conjoin with your Mercury retrograde. Now what happens here that you need to understand is, generally when Sun would have gone into the 11th house, it would have been like a great signification, because it would kind of technically mean things like your financial gains could be expected to be exponentially increased. You could have expected to have even better networking relationships with people, and increase in your just your equation with your friendships and stuff like that. But now what happens here is the fact that because Mercury retrograde is so powerful in this house right now, because it is in its own sign of Virgo, so any planet that is going to come about in this conjunction right now in this house is going to sort of be dictated by the rules of Mercury retrograde, right? And its effect that is going to take place. So you have to sort of understand the fact that Sun coming here is not going to negate per se anything that the Mercury retrograde is setting up right now. So what happens here is that you have to, again, kind of not be swayed by other people's opinions, have a pragmatic approach and be realistic with yourself, kind of be analytical as much as you can, and take a step back and kind of, really check in with yourself regarding, do I really hear what other people are saying right now, or should I just, believe in my own instinct and sort of go along with that. So don't be right now, paying much heed to what people are saying around you, because it can actually not be true, and it can have, there's a possibility it's not done in good faith. So you have to be careful regarding that prospect, especially when it comes to your colleagues. So you have to be careful regarding that. And so what happens next is, on the 24th of September, Venus is going to transit into Virgo. And now this signification is very integral, because as I had explained before, that the narrative that your friends or your colleagues or your acquaintances are having about your romantic, especially relationships, can sort of cause you to have secondary thoughts about, what am I doing really, and is this is this relationship something that I can trust to be completely give myself to vulnerably and present myself to as authentically as I would like to. So you have to be careful about that, because Venus's significations in the sixth house turn debilitated, right? So it kind of gets weakened. So that is something that you need to be extremely careful about. Venus being significatory of monetary benefits or monetary enrichment, kind of moving into the house of expanded financial gains, shows that you could actually be able to gain money right now, but you have to be careful regarding something. There will be something, like if there is, maybe let's say there's a contract or something that you have to sign, and that is what is finally going to make you liable to earn. There can be possibilities where you misread something, and you get stuck in a stipulation that you wouldn't want to actually. So that is something that you need to be careful about, and just be cognizant of the fact that these sort of possibilities are something that you need to be on a lookout for. Also, all the other significations of the other transits, which is Saturn retrograde, be it Jupiter retrograde, or even the Rahu Ketu axis, all of it has been discussed in videos that have been released prior on this channel, and I will be linking them in the description box. They will also be linked at the end of the video in a playlist that will be attached, and you can definitely watch all of that to just get an idea of how these planets' energies are going to be significatory for you. Also, as I was just checking this, there's a mistake here, like Ketu right now is not transiting through Scorpio, Ketu is transiting through Libra, so it's in your 12th house. Just saying. So I hope for you the month of September turns out really well, and let me know in the comment section how, if the predictions have resonated with your experience. And thank you so much for watching. Sagittarius natives, for you, how the month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the main transits that are happening are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Sun. So we're going to evaluate how this combined energy will affect you when it moves from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo, and also how all the other transits that have been taking place from the previous month and carry over into this month, how those can be read in corroboration with these transits that are taking place in the month of September, to figure out how it is going to turn out for you. So let's start with the first transit that is taking place at the precipice of the previous month, which was on the 31st of August, Venus moving into or transiting into the sign of Leo. So this energy is going to take place in your 9th house, and Sun and Mercury were already present here prior to 31st of August. So all of this positive connotational energy being in your 9th house shows that you can have the possibility of actually traveling for long distance travels, right? Having some foreign vacations and sort of that kind of stuff. And there is also the possibility of you actually connecting with someone on these travels, and it can be someone who's quite exotic, someone who's quite unusual to your general kind of type that you would usually go for. And this is sort of corroborated by the Rahu's transit in your 5th house, in because Rahu sort of shows unusual, kind of unexpected people, and being in your 5th house of romance shows that there's a possibility of you actually starting something on maybe one of these travels, or getting connected with someone who's a foreigner, or someone who is way removed from your culture or your own significations of type or whatever, that sort of stuff. Now, another thing that I can kind of see is that your relationship with your father during this transit of Venus is going to turn quite positive. And why this is going to be quite integral for you is because all the significations of family in astrology are sort of getting affected for you right now. And why is that? Is because Saturn retrograde is happening in your 2nd house of family and family values. Now, after that, Jupiter retrograde is taking place in your 4th house of family and home. And on top of that, Mars's transit in the sign of Taurus is taking place in your 6th house of disputes. So all of this cumulative energy somewhere down the line relating to family and home is kind of being quite the negative impact right now, because it's kind of making you reconsider things. It's kind of creating those uncomfortable situations wherein there can be increased misunderstandings, there can be disputes within the family, and that sort of stuff. So this kind of boost of energy of having like a very cordial and pleasant equation with your father is going to be very beneficial to you. Also, there can be a possibility that you kind of are sort of getting interested in your own culture right now, getting to learn about that, being able to explore that. That is also something. Or you can even on one of your travels get interested in some other culture and some other religions, and that sort of thing is also possible. So those are the kind of energies you can expect with this transit. Now the next transit that takes place is on the 10th of September, wherein Mercury retrograde happens in the sign of Virgo in your 10th house. This is quite an impactful transit because Mercury is the planet that rules the sign of Virgo. So it's going into its own sign, and but it's in the retrograde motion. Now, generally, if Mercury would have been in Virgo, it would have really positive connotations of things like being analytical, being critically thinking about stuff, being perfection oriented, having quite an eloquent speech, and that sort of stuff. But now, because it's turning retrograde, so all the sort of significations it has is turning the opposite, right? So what happens here is that your communication with your superiors at work is going to be tricky around now, because there can be possibilities that you're saying something and it is getting misconstrued, or it's coming off in a much different tone that you would like it to, and that sort of communicational channel is going to create issues with people at your workplace especially, and the possibility of it being your superiors is even higher. And this sort of energy kind of corroborates with the Mars's transit happening in your 6th house, right? And it's happening in the sign of Taurus. So this energy kind of gets even more amplified. And I have spoken about this transit of Mars in the sign of Taurus in a very recent video. I would definitely urge you to watch that, because this is quite a significant transit and it's taking place for 8 months well into 2023. So it will give you a sort of idea as to what to expect regarding these kind of equations and disputes that can arise at work right now for you. Now, what happens also here is the fact that your Mercury retrograde from the 10th house is putting a direct aspect onto the Jupiter retrograde happening in your 4th house. And in turn, the Jupiter retrograde is putting its aspect onto the Mercury retrograde as well. So what kind of significations we can see to come about from here is the fact that the balance that you need to strike with the troubles that are happening with your family and the troubles that are going to start to sort of fester into your work life is kind of something that is going to, make you spread thin between these two things, and how to balance both of these things right now, simultaneously kind of peering its head in your life at this point. So that is something that you would need to look out for. You have to kind of sit back and evaluate how your work life balance is really going, and how maybe your attitude regarding be it family or be it regarding work is not serving you anymore. So kind of backtracking and looking back at reevaluating how your communicational channel is basically kind of hindering your own progress right now. So that is something that can definitely be beneficial to you, and this can kind of work positively with the significations of what Mercury retrograde's energies are really going to be like. So what happens next is that there's a transit on the 17th of September wherein Sun transits into the sign of Virgo, and it comes in conjunction with the Mercury retrograde that is already present there. So generally what would happen is that Sun coming into the 10th house would generally be a very positive connotation. So but what happens here is that Mercury because it's being in its own sign and it's retrograde in its motion, it becomes quite powerful. So whatever planets come in conjunction with it right now will not be able to trump its effect, right? So they will kind of have to subdue and follow the kind of significations that Mercury retrograde is setting right now. So whatever I have explained about how Mercury retrograde is going to impact you right now, especially with your professional prospects, is something that you need to be wary of. You need to be careful about how much passion and drive you're right now willing to put into your work, and how much of it is really serving you for the positive or for the benefit, right? And how much of you being critical or you being extremely perfection oriented is actually setting you up for failure right now at this point. Figure out how you would want to rectify these things, how you would want to work around these things if possible. And that is a sort of energy that kind of, starts to fester when Sun moves into the 10th house, right? So even though you're putting your efforts, even though you're sort of being extremely focused at your work, there's a possibility that even as harsh as you're trying to be at yourself to be perfection oriented, it's not going to be possible. You're going to come short. You're going to fall short of the kind of outcome that you would like to receive right now. And that is going to set like a damper onto your spirits, and you're sort of going to go into this spiral of kind of thinking pessimistically, thinking critically about yourself. And that is something that you need to be cognizant of, that, don't allow yourself to go into that downward spiral of thinking negatively and kind of not being optimistic about stuff and things like that. So what happens next is on the 24th of September, Venus is moving into your 10th house, right? With the conjunction of the Mercury retrograde and Sun already present there. So as I had explained already before, Mercury retrograde's aspect on all of these planets right now in the 10th house is going to be supreme. So whatever tone that this transit is setting is going to be followed by the other planets right now because of the precedence of its energies in the sign of Virgo. Also, what happens is Venus becomes debilitated in the sign of Virgo. So this kind of shows the fact that even though you're putting all your efforts, all your appreciation, all your work into, being the best at what you do, it's not going to serve you right now in the best of its abilities, right? And that is something that you need to accept. You need to accept the fact that even though you are trying your best, it might not right now be possible for you to get the sort of outcome or the sort of benefits that you're expecting to receive because of your efforts, right? So that is something that you need to kind of look out for and kind of assess how much effort you are really putting into work, and how that can actually be the reason why your dynamic with your family is suffering, because you don't have the energy left anymore to mend those disagreements or to mend those, broken channels of communication with your family. So you need to be cognizant of the fact and sort of reevaluate and rethink what your priorities in life at this point are right now. So that is something that can be seen for you in the month of September. All the other transits that have been taking place, be it the Saturn retrograde or the Jupiter retrograde or even the Rahu Ketu's axis, all of this has been discussed in prior videos that have been made on the channel, and I will be linking all of those in the description box, as well as at the end of the video there will be a playlist attached where you can see all of these, and this will give you a kind of idea as to what you can expect to come about in the month of September for you. So I hope you have a great month of September, and please let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with you. And thanks so much for watching. Capricorn natives, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the main transits that are happening in this month are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Venus and Sun, which are cumulatively moving or transiting from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. And we're going to figure out how this change in signs is going to affect you and the signification that it presents for you in the month of September, as well as all the other transits that are taking place of other planets from prior to this month, which are continuing in this month as well. We're going to corroborate and link the significations of all of these transits happening to paint a picture of what this month of September can look like for you and what are the significations that you can expect to come about in this month. So starting off with the first transit that started at the precipice of the previous month, which was on the 31st of August, Venus transited into the sign of Leo, and this is happening in your 8th house, wherein Mercury and Sun were already present prior to 31st of August. So all of this cumulative energy happening in your 8th house shows that there is a possibility of you actually enriching yourself financially from on someone else's accord, right? So you can kind of gain money through other people's resources right now, and that is a possibility that you can kind of look into. There's also the possibility of you maybe looking into actually conjoining your assets with your loved one, your romantic partner or your life partner. That can also be that sort of energy being created because of this. Also, this energy, if you're single, kind of plays into the fact that you can start something instinctively. Quite some relationship can come about in a very unexpected way, and it can be such a passionate, mysterious alliance and kind of relationship that it kind of dazes you, like it sucks you into its appeal and that sort of thing. And this kind of plays into another signification of the Mars's transit that is happening in the sign of Taurus in your 5th house of romantic relationships. So it further corroborates that there's a chance of you actually meeting someone who's quite alluring, mysterious, and you can start like a very an intimate and a passionate alliance with them. So that is the sort of energy that can also be present right now. And also with regards to money, this Mars's transit is very integral because it is taking place over the period of 8 months, well into 2023. There's a dedicated video about this that I have recently released on the channel, and I would definitely urge you to watch it because it's going to give you an idea as to how the significations of this transit is going to impact your financial and monetary aspects. So this will be linked in the description box, as well as in the end of the video. You can watch it in a dedicated playlist where all of the transits have been mentioned. Now, what happens next is that on the 10th of September, Mercury turns retrograde in the sign of Virgo. And this transit is taking place through your 9th house right now. So what this kind of tells us is the fact that you can right now, when it comes to your religious or your spiritual or your philosophical beliefs, you can actually turn quite intolerant, or let's say your communication regarding it when it comes to your views about these things can kind of turn on its head. So even though you want to express something positively or in a way which is not being biased or being offensive about your opinions, it can kind of be perceived by people that way. And that is something that you need to be careful about, how you're communicating about your values, how you're communicating about your beliefs, and how this is really coming across to people who you're trying to communicate it to, right? That is a possibility that you need to be aware of, and you need to sort of take a step back and kind of reevaluate your own thought processes at this time regarding all these aspects of, be it religious beliefs, be it spiritual beliefs, or be it your philosophical ideals. So that is something that you need to kind of figure out right now, and you need to reevaluate, realign, and sort of create that approach wherein you communicate it effectively, wherein the other person is not, the person you're communicating it to is not left wondering what your stance really is, so that your words don't get misconstrued and misunderstood, and finally it doesn't turn as offensive as you wouldn't want it to be. So that is something that you need to be careful regarding. Also, if you're having any sort of plans regarding traveling to, long distance travels and going to foreign vacations or something of that sort, be extremely careful of how you're planning your itinerary. Don't leave anything up to chance. Don't make spontaneous travels, because there can be a huge possibility that something can be thrown into the wrench, and your plans will not turn out how you want them to. So that is something that you also need to be careful about. You need to plan out everything to the T, and kind of deal with the fact that there can be deviations from your plans. So that is something that you need to look out for as well. Now what happens is, as I had explained before, regarding your ideals, philosophical ideals, or whatever religious or spiritual ideals, there is a possibility wherein you actually communicate this online, and that is when people kind of take it in a very different way than you have intended it to, and then sort of that kind of gives you this kind of backlash, or a sort of critical analysis regarding your words and stuff like that. So this is a possibility which is happening because the Mercury retrograde from your ninth house is sort of aspecting your Jupiter retrograde that is taking place in your third house. And in turn, the Jupiter retrograde is aspecting your ninth house. So this transit is, this effect of exchange of energies is happening on the third nine axis, which also shows the fact that if you are planning to go abroad for some sort of educational plan, like you're planning to have some higher educational degrees or post-grad degrees, something of that sort. So you have to be careful of how you're planning that, and as well as if you are already in it, you have to be kind of assured of how you're kind of putting your efforts and how you're looking at the efforts that you're putting, because there is a possibility that you can be extremely critical about your own self right now, and the efforts that you're putting into your work, the efforts that you're putting into your education can be a possibility that is very, very much possible right now. Also because of the Mars transit in the fifth house. So all of this shows that you can kind of turn to be extremely critical about yourself, right? And that further gets corroborated because of Saturn's retrograde transit in your first house of self. So this shows that your ascendant lord being retrograde in its own sign in the first house is like your self-confidence is down in the drain at this point. So sorry to say that. And that is something that you kind of need to be working on. And this Mercury retrograde transit can actually give you that sort of insight into what you really need to sit back and evaluate and, kind of not be as critical about. So that is something that can actually work well if you're willing to do the work to, sit back and kind of relax and just reevaluate rather than just keeping on, going further and achieving more, which can be something Capricorns are generally prone to do, right? They can keep working themselves into a burnout. So don't do that. Now what happens next is that the sun gets its transit into the sign of Virgo on the 17th of September. So what happens here is the fact that generally if sun would transit into the ninth house, I would definitely have very positive connotations regarding it. But because Mercury retrograde right now is happening in its own sign of Virgo, this shows that the significations of any other planets that are coming in conjunction with this planet right now is not going to turn the situation completely different, or it's not going to have a positive connotation per se. So what happens is Mercury retrograde's significations turn to be extremely, the supreme effect of the Mercury retrograde transit is going to trump anything else right now. So when sun sort of gets into this house as well, you are going to start to kind of evaluate your own beliefs. You're going to kind of look at how you are juxtaposing your religious, spiritual, philosophical ideals with who you think you really are, right? So that can be something that can give you that sort of existential crisis of who am I really? Because it can kind of turn, like, if you're sort of getting flack or hate for your values, it can kind of make you think, okay, if this is not right, then what is? And if I attribute my personality to a huge extent to my beliefs that I hold, then who am I really? So that sort of, conflict can sort of ensue, wherein you start to evaluate all, like, existential questions of who am I? If not my values, then what is that something that describes me at this point? Which is also something that completely coincides with the Saturn's retrograde transit happening in your first house. So that is the sort of energy that can start to come about with this transit. And the next thing that happens is on the 24th of September, Venus transits into the sign of Virgo. So here, what happens is the fact that all of this romance that was taking place before, right? As I said, that there could be an unexpected romance, there could be possible passionate alliances and stuff like that. What happens when Venus comes into the sign of its own debilitation is the fact that you are going to turn quite critical about even your romantic partner, right? What are the kind of chances that you're having with them? And even just your bonding can turn to be quite critical. So you are sort of going to not be as, interested in putting your efforts into that, because there are greater things that are sort of needing your attention right now, which are quite pressing than just that romantic relationship. It's not going to serve as a board or solace from the conflicts that you're facing right now. So that is also sort of going to add to the plate of things that you're sort of, going about, critically thinking about, and sort of reassessing and uh, figuring out what the connotations of it really are for you right now. So this is the sort of energy that can manifest for you in the month of September. I hope you have a great month ahead, and let me know in the comment section if any of these significations have resonated with you. And thank you so much for watching. Aquarius natives, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the major transits happening are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Sun, and Venus. They are changing their signs cumulatively from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. So we're going to see how this change in signs is going to impact you, as well as see all the other transits that are taking place of the different planets, and kind of read everything together to paint a picture of what can be an expected outcome for you in the month of September. So starting off with the first transit that took place at the precipice of the previous month, which was Venus's transit into Leo on 31st of August. This happens in your 7th house, and Mercury and Sun were already present there prior to 31st of August. So what we see here is that all of this positive connotational energy, because all these three planets are basically beneficial in astrology. So we see that in the 7th house of love and romance, and let's say partnerships, marriage, romantic relationships, it shows that you can feel quite invigorated, validated, and just like you can feel seen in your romantic relationships right now, in your marriage, may it be, even it can also be in your business partnerships as well. So there's a possibility that you feel loved right now, you feel seen, and it's all in all a very good positive connotation for your 7th house significations, because Venus is the planet of romance, it's the planet of partnership, and coming into the house of your marriage and business relationships shows that it's a really good omen for your personal relationships, personal and intimate relationships as well. So this is a really great transit. Now what happens is, next on the 10th of September, Mercury is going retrograde in the sign of Virgo, and this is happening in your 8th house. So Mercury basically rules the sign of Virgo, right? And generally this would have been a great prospect of positive connotations, but what happens here is that because of it going retrograde, all the positive connotations of Mercury in Virgo are going to turn opposite. So let's say the things which could have been like, your communicational pattern could have been extremely eloquent. Also, you could have been perfection oriented. You could have great critical and analytical thinking processes will all sort of start to, kind of change in its connotation and turn a little opposite of what it would have been. So, what do we see here when Mercury turns retrograde in your 8th house is that you can sort of start to communicate about things which are not known to many people, kind of occult things and things which people can find taboo even. So it can also be something along the lines of, let's say, conspiracy theories, right? Like people don't talk much about it, or like very select few people talk about it. And it's like, to a point, it's like a conjecture thing. Okay, are you just like making it up, or like, is there some validity behind whatever claims you're making? So that sort of energy presents itself when Mercury is in the 8th house. So there could be chances where you're communicating about these sort of things that can actually, you can miscommunicate your ideas about it, or you can miscommunicate with the wrong sort of people around you, and that can kind of get you into hot waters. So that is like a kind of energy that I see happening here. Also, the 8th house is your house of, let's say, secrets. It's the house of mystery. So what happens is, this can also show the fact that there can be either secrets of yours or the secrets of people who have shared something quite, salacious or whatever, like, quite secretive with you, can actually be spoken about, and in a way that kind of sensationalizes it. And that can even cause you to, have some sort of issues regarding that as well. It can lead to some sort of disputes, or, a verbal spat sort of a situation as well. So that is the kind of energy which is also possible with this transit. Also, we will see that because Mercury shows your ingenuity of ideas, and it can show your thought process. And the 8th house is all about your profits that you receive from other people's resources. So this can show that you can actually kind of go the extra mile just to be able to enrich yourself right now on the basis of someone else's profit. Or there can be some communication with this sort of person which can actually backtrack all the progress that you would have made until now to be able to receive that, that money or that benefit. So that is something which is also possible, preferably. And you have to kind of, I think if you really want to use the energies of the Mercury retrograde in a positive connotation, I would definitely say, like, take a step back and kind of look at your values, how you're kind of thinking about your niche ideas and interests, right? Which kind of not many people share, but you need to still be careful that it shouldn't kind of turn into this toxic realm of, just conjectures and, not have any validity or not have any substantial proof behind it. It shouldn't just be speaking and making castles in the air sort of a situation. So I think that is something that you need to kind of, reevaluate and kind of understand, think about it more. And what also happens here is that another interesting phenomena that's happening here is the fact that Mercury retrograde from your 8th house aspects the Jupiter retrograde that is happening in your 2nd house. And in turn, the Jupiter retrograde is also aspecting this Mercury retrograde. So what does this tell us is that, this to 2nd and 8th axis, right? A 2nd house, 8th house axis shows us that money matters are something that you kind of need to be pragmatic about, even though it can seem to be a little difficult to be. You have to stay positive about the prospect of actually receiving this benefit or this kind of enrichment on the basis of someone's profits or someone else's resources, right? And you cannot start to be completely pessimistic about it, or kind of beat yourself about the probability of it not happening, because that can come about in the most unexpected ways possible. So you have to kind of keep the faith of being on the receiving end of that sort of monetary enrichment and benefits. And this kind of energy further corroborates itself when the Mars's transit is happening in the sign of Taurus in your fourth house. And this is smack dab clearly shows the fact that you are right now somewhere down the line in connection with something monetary in the basis of like getting something from your family. Like it can be sort of like even an inheritance or anything of that sort. So that prospect also kind of, reiterates itself with this transit of Mars as well. And I've spoken about this transit in a recent video in quite a detail, and I would definitely urge you to watch it, because the transit of Mars in Taurus is very significant, because it's going to go on for almost 8 months, well into 2023. So I think watching that video will definitely give you some more context as to what you can expect to come about in the sense of your monetary prospects. And the next transit that takes place is a transit of Sun in the sign of Virgo on the 17th of September. So what happens here is that Sun further joins Mercury in your 8th house. And later when Venus also joins here, the one principle that you need to remember is that in this conjunction, the strongest planet right now here is the Mercury retrograde, right? Because it's happening in its own sign of Virgo. So its connotations and its results are going to be more prevalent, and it will also sort of influence the effects that the Venus and Sun's transit would have in your 8th house. So what happens when Sun also comes here? It's not going to change the connotations of the Mercury retrograde. It's going to play into it. So what can happen is you can sort of, be in communication with your father regarding something, that has to come from him, any monetary benefit, but you need to be extremely careful of how you're able to communicate with him. Also, if you are in the process of, let's say, like an official signing of papers or something of that sort, be extremely careful to read everything, because there is a possibility that right now something can be missed, and rather than having to read between the lines, make sure that everything is very properly understood and deciphered, because it can later lead into some issues if you are not careful regarding that. So that is another thing. You can also sort of become quite mysterious and aloof. Like you might not be as open communicatively with other people at this point. So that can also be a prospect which is possible right now. And definitely your interest into occult subjects, your interest into taboo subjects will go further and deeper. So you can kind of get into researching more about it and getting to know more about it. So it becomes like, a sort of obsession to keep going deeper and deeper into that understanding and research. That can also come about. And those are the major significations that happen with the Sun's transit here as well. Now, what happens is the next transit that is taking place on the 24th of September, Venus moves into the sign of Virgo. So all of these planets are right now in the 8th house in the sign of Virgo. Now, Venus is considered to be debilitated or weakened in the sign of Virgo. So what this means is that all this positive energy prior to, the start of this Mercury retrograde transit that started, everything positive in your romantic relationship kind of turns weird. And weird in what sense is that as close as you felt with your partner before, you can sort of start to have doubts regarding the authenticity of your connection. And it can sort of also lead to you not exposing that sort of relationship that you have with someone, actually, keeping it under wraps or keeping it under secret so that people don't come to know about it. That sort of energy is also present here. And this can also maybe be possible that you kind of develop some weird intimacy options with your partner. if you know what I mean. So that can also be a possibility. And the Venus's transit generally into the 8th house would show the possibility of you actually enriching and benefiting from someone's resources. But because again, Mercury retrograde is going to trump the effect of any other planet in the 8th house right now. So I would definitely say wait, be patient about it. Don't try to rush into something, and kind of reevaluate your strategy and understand how it would be easier for you to be able to reach your means of attaining that sort of benefit. So that is something definitely that you need to look into. Now, all the other transits that have been taking place, be it the Jupiter retrograde transit, Saturn retrograde transit, Rahu and Ketu axis, and everything else has been discussed before in, on the channel in different videos. I will be linking them in the description box, or also it will be linked in a playlist which has all of these videos, and you can watch them and kind of understand how the significations for you are going to turn out. I hope you have a great month of September. Let me know in the comment section if the predictions resonated with your experience. Thank you so much for watching. Pisces, for you, how this month of September is going to turn out based on the planetary transits that are taking place in this month. We see that the major transits happening are of the faster moving planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Sun. And these are cumulatively transiting from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. So we're going to understand how this change of signs is basically going to impact you, as well as see how all the other transits that have been taking place from the previous months and have been carrying on in this month as well, how these two transits can collaboratively be seen relating to some possible outcomes for you in the month of September. Starting off with the transit which took place at the precipice of the previous month, which is on the 31st of August, Venus moved into the sign of Leo. So this is happening in your 6th house, and Mercury and Sun were already present there prior to this transit. So what happens is this cumulative energy is right now present in your 6th house of, your work environment and your diseases and your competitions and that sort of energy. So what happens is with the Venus's transit here, Venus is considered to be debilitated in Virgo, right? Which you will further get to know as well. And Virgo has kind of similar energies to the 6th house. So what happens is Venus coming here shows the fact that the kind of issues that you would have been facing with your colleagues in relation to the fact that there might be something that you have communicated to them that has been misconstrued and taken out of context, and it could either also be just the fact that your dedication right now kind of irks people, and that sort of equation can decrease the likability that you have regarding how well you kind of gel into the team at your workplace, right? And this can kind of deteriorate your likability in general, which can make it easier for people to come for you and kind of plan something against you and do something which is not done in good faith, and that sort of energy is present here. So you have to be on the lookout for that sort of energy being exposed to you. Be very perceptive and kind of quite vigilant regarding that. Now, what happens is next, on the 10th of September, Mercury becomes retrograde in the sign of Virgo. Happens in your 7th house of marriage and business partnerships. So this shows that, especially when it comes to your business, you have to be extremely careful of how you're able to communicate things regarding your business right now, because they can be misconstrued and that can actually lead you to be facing monetary losses, right? That is something that you have to be extremely careful about, because Mercury is also the sign that kind of is representative of business and communication. So showing that this energy is kind of becoming retrograde in the sign that it is actually most exalted in, because Mercury works really good in the sign of Virgo. It's its sign that is ruled by the planet of Mercury. So This clearly shows a signification that whatever business transactions you're dealing with right now, if there is any paperwork that is involved with it, you have to be extremely careful of double checking it twice, of making sure everything is correct, and not miss anything while reading between the lines and actually having to bear losses because of some clause or some stipulation that you kind of didn't pay attention to. So that is something you have to necessarily be on the watch for. Don't get duped with the Mars's transit happening in Taurus in your third house. So this shows that you right now can have the possibility to be quite blunt with people and quite say it as it is sort of an attitude, but that maybe is not something that people will take positively. So you have to be careful regarding that. And this transit also talks a lot about how your monetary securities and stability is going to be. And this is quite an integral transit because it's going to take place for almost 8 months, well into 2023. So I would definitely urge you to watch this video. It's been recently released on the channel. You can also watch it as I would be linking it in the description box, as well as at the end of the video there will be a playlist which will be attached and you can watch it there as well. Now what happens is this Mercury retrograde that is happening in your 7th house gets a direct aspect from the Jupiter retrograde that is happening in your 1st house, and simultaneously this Mercury retrograde also aspects your 1st house of self and also the Jupiter retrograde. So this mutual transference of energy between these two planets in the retrograde motion shows that you can right now be quite, I would say, it's hard for you to right now be quite analytical when it comes to things regarding your business. You can right now have the tendency to not be as diplomatic as you would like to be. You can come off as quite combative right now, especially in your communication. And that is somehow going to impact your ideals, your beliefs, and even how you kind of view yourself, which can become quite critical. You can sort of, be overtly critical with yourself regarding your business prowess, regarding your decisions that you've been taking in order to make better monetary profits. So that is something you have to be careful about, not to get into that sort of thought process. Now what happens next is that the next transit is on the 17th of September. Sun transits into the sign of Virgo, and this happens in your 7th house. Now, Sun is also considered to be debilitated in the sign of Libra, and this would also signify the 7th house energies. So for you, this does not seem like a really great omen, because it's not just going to be Sun being debilitated here, but when Venus conjoins it also, Venus is debilitated in the sign of Virgo itself. So there's a whole lot of host of debilitated energy happening in your 7th house. So I would definitely say be careful regarding how you're dealing with your romantic relationships, how you're dealing with your partner in marriage. And that is something you have to be extremely careful about. Don't turn critical about everything and sort of, over analyze or negatively impact those sort of relationships, because that is something that can have the probability of, taking place. You have to be careful to not get so oriented about striking a balance, be it in your business partnerships or in your romantic partnerships, that you sort of start to even neglect your own self. Right? You have to kind of check in with yourself and see what is happening, kind of recuperate, take a step back and kind of evaluate how your business transactions are going. What do you need to change if something is not going according to you, rather than, sitting and criticizing yourself and it not actually helping you in a constructive way. It's much better that you take a step back rather than keeping on being on the offensive and trying to keep going forward if nothing is changing. Kind of stop and take a step back and realize what is actually going wrong in that equation, be it your business partnerships, how you're conducting your business, as well as even your romantic partnerships, how you're dealing with that, how are you communicating, is it apt for you to actually sit and criticize your partner if you kind of don't self-actualize how you yourself have an onus of, keeping a good peacekeeping environment in the relationship. So those are the sort of things that you need to concentrate on. You need to start to, kind of rethink about, recuperate, kind of understand, and kind of get a different perspective on. So that is something I would definitely say would come about with the sun's transit in the sign of Virgo in your 7th house. Now, the next transit that takes place is on the 24th of September, and this is the transit of Venus into the sign of Virgo. And as I had said before, Venus is debilitated in this sign. So this shows that your troubles with the relationships are going to get even like magnified even more. So it's not, I'm going to say it as it is, but it's really not going to be a great time for your relationships. And you have to really work hard. You have to really work hard to kind of peel back the layers and kind of understand what is right now going wrong, and like how can you also take the onus in kind of rectifying that energy, rectifying that miscommunication, and the effects that it's having on your relationship. So that is definitely something that comes about in this case. Also, Venus in the 7th house can show that right now your business transactions might actually not monetarily board outcomes that you would expect it to, and that sort of lack in revenue generation can cause you to be quite critical about your own business ideas, to be quite critical about how you're dealing with it. So rather than being critical and judgmental about it, kind of take a step back and analyze, realize what is going wrong here. How can you churn more profits and kind of let the boat keep sailing, or the ship sailing. So that is something that is definitely going to be like the theme of your month, because so much of the energy is concentrated on your 7th house. So other than that, all the other transits that have been taking place, be it the Saturn retrograde, the Jupiter retrograde, or even the Mars transit, all of this has been covered on the channel, and it will be linked in the description box, as well as at the end of the video you will see that there is a playlist which is attached, which has all of these videos, so you can watch that as well and kind of get an idea of how these transits are going to manifest results for you. Let me know in the comment section if anything resonated with you, and I hope you have a great month of September, and thanks so much for watching. And with that, I come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great month of September. Let me know in the comment section if any of these predictions have resonated with you, and I will see you soon with a very interesting next video. Stay tuned. Take care.